Thank you for the kind invitation. Thank you in particular to Thoukidides and the Thoukidides think tank for inviting me and the group that's with me to Cyprus for this great opportunity. This is in fact our first full day. It's an excellent moment to discuss Cyprus and the region. So much is going on. I'd like to discuss Turkey and Iran, which I consider to be the two most important countries for the future of the region, as well as Syria and Egypt, which are the ones in greatest crisis, as well as a little bit on American foreign policy, and finally a few thoughts on Cyprus itself. I thought I would organize it by month. June was the month for the Turkish problem, and July for the Egyptian problem, and August for the Syrian problem, and September for the Iran problem. We're only halfway through October. I don't know what country gets October. It could be Sudan, where there's real unrest. But anyway, starting with June and Turkey. The issue in Turkey is not Islamism. It's not the economy. It's not the Kurds. It's not even Syria. The real issue in Turkey today is Recep Tayyip Erdogan, the Prime Minister. Erdogan came to office in March of 2003, and for some 8-9 years did a brilliant job. He moved slowly. He focused on economic growth, on EU accession, on Kurds, even to a certain extent on Cyprus. He was popular in that his vote went up from 34% in 2002 to 45% in 2007 to 50% in 2011. He went from strength to strength. Economy did fantastically. The philosophy of his foreign minister, Ahmet Davutoglu, zero problems with neighbors, was seemingly successful. Memorably, he went on a vacation with his wife and Bashar al-Assad and his wife. Good relations with most important countries, Iran, Syria. He didn't have good relations with Israel because he didn't want good relations with Israel. And then, in the last year or so, it's all fallen apart. And at this point, his popularity is down, the economy is down, the currency is down, interest rates are up. He's a far more contentious politician in Turkey than he used to be. In foreign relations, bad relations with Russia, with Iran, with Iraq, with Syria, obviously, with Israel, with Egypt, terrible relations with Egypt, with Cyprus, Greece, problems everywhere, instead of problems nowhere. Perhaps symbolic of it all is the fact that a few days ago, an Egyptian who worked for the Turkish radio and television, on air, said, he was broadcasting in Arabic on Turkish television, said, "I quit. I'm ashamed that I ever worked for the Turks. I'm going back to Egypt. Please forgive me for working for Turkey." That's how bad things are going. Now, the issue is Recep Tayyip Erdogan. He was so smart, he was so careful, and yet he's thrown it all away. And as the problems develop, he's doubling his problems. He is not learning from his problems. He's becoming more hardline, more conspiracy theorist, more antagonistic. And it's hard to see where this is going, except that he is losing his standing in Turkey. Now, the striking thing about Turkish politics today is that other than the people on the street in June, all the politics is within the Islamist circles. The CHP, the Socialist Anti-Islamist Party, it's number 2, has no leadership, no ideas, no innovation. It's an old party with little importance. The real debate is between, for example, Abdullah Gül, who is the president of Turkey, for Fethullah Gulen, who is the leader of this huge movement, the Hizmet movement, and Erdogan. And his other members of the party, such as Bülent Arınç or Ali Babacan, these are the key figures in Turkish politics. I don't know where it's going, but I do think that Erdogan's decade is pretty much over, that he's not going to become a strong president, and that it's likely that others in the Islamist camp will say, thank you, Tayyip, you did a great job, time to go. It's a time of weakness for the Turkish government, and particularly for Erdogan and Davutoglu. July brought the largest demonstrations in human history in Egypt. June 30th in particular saw something in the order of 25, 30, 35 million people out of 85 million on the streets of Egypt. And a few days later, on July 3rd, the defense minister, Dr. Fattah al-Sisi, threw Morsi out of office and has been ruling now for 3.5 months. It's very hard to be optimistic about Egypt. It's very hard to predict where it's going. There are two great problems in Egypt. One is the division, very stark and very vicious, between the Islamists on the one hand and the anti-Islamists on the other hand. They can't talk to each other anymore. What is so striking about Egypt is that within the course of a single year, so many people turned against Islamism. One saw something like that in Gezi Park, but much, much, much more in Egypt. They just don't want it. They say, no, thank you. And the Islamists feel that the power was stolen from them, and they're furious. But the other great problem is economic. There is a huge economic problem in Egypt. What was once the breadbasket of the Nile can no longer feed itself. In fact, over 2/3 of the caloric intake of the food in Egypt comes from abroad, is imported. The trouble is that Egypt doesn't have the money to pay for that. It's got loans and gifts now from some rich Arab countries, but it's not earning the money, not internally and not making sales abroad. Everywhere you look, be it remittances from Libya or gas and oil sales to Israel and Jordan, or Suez Canal receipts, cotton exports, or tourism, everything is down. And it's hard to see how this is going to improve because the military, which rules Egypt, also has a very substantial stake in the economy. The military runs about 1/4 of the Egyptian economy. It makes everything from chairs to bottled water to diapers to macaroni. And these items come out of antique socialist factories that the military benefits from and doesn't want to see changed. So entrepreneurship, free market, these are unpleasant thoughts for the military, and it's likely to keep this antique socialist import substitution scheme from Gamal Abdel Nasser in the 1950s. It's going to keep it in place. So it's hard to see change either the political or the economic one. What I can see is hunger, even starvation, rebellion, depression. It's very much in Sisi's hands. He hasn't really done anything very much in 3.5 months. Who knows what he has in mind? Who knows what exactly the internal politics of the army are? But so far, nothing much has changed except that he pushed out the Islamists and is jailing and killing Islamists. June, July, August. August was Syria. Of course, the focus was on chemical weapons after the attack on August 21st, and what appeared to be an American response and the framework developed between the United States and the Soviet Union. And now we have, apparently, some of the chemical weapons being destroyed. I don't think chemical weapons are the key. Chemical weapons killed maybe 1% of those who died in the course of the Civil War, now 2.5 years old. Far more important is the war that's taking place, the civil war between various factions in Syria. Now, Syria is divided effectively in three, with the northeastern corner dominated by the Kurds, and the Kurds have pulled away from the rest of Syria. They're not interested in Syria. They're interested in their own area, and they're interested in the Iraqi Kurdish area. So, and potentially a Turkish Kurdish area. So what we see here is the emergence of a Kurdistan, which has potentially great importance. For the first time in a century, the first time since World War I, there's the prospect of a Kurdish state emerging. Until now, it seemed like a fantasy. Today, because of developments in Iraq in the 1990s, in Syria in the last 2.5 years, in Turkey in the last few years, things are happening for the Kurds. And I think this is a welcome development, certainly from our point of view. The Kurds have shown themselves to be more responsible politically than their neighbors, and for the Kurds to get autonomy or even a separate state is, I think, something we should welcome. The rest of Syria, other than the Kurdish area, is divided between the central region, basically, which is dominated by the government, and the peripheral areas, which are dominated by the rebels. Now, the rebels are not a single unit. They're the Islamist rebels and the non-Islamist rebels, and then the Al-Qaeda rebels and the non-Al-Qaeda rebels. They're fighting each other. What I've noticed over the last half year is that there is a lot of stability. Things were moving before. The towns were falling. The map was changing. But since about April, about half a year ago, not much has changed. There's a certain stability, a certain stalemate, and I think this is something probably good for the outside world. Because what we have are Turkish and Saudi and Qatari-backed jihadis, Sunni jihadis, who are fighting the Iranian-backed Shia jihadis. I don't know about you, but I think the jihadis are best off fighting each other than they are fighting us. So I say, let them continue. While there are, of course, dangers and the humanitarian problems here, I think the best result is the one that's actually there, which is stalemate. Let them fight each other. And I would go a step further, perhaps you wouldn't. I would say that if one side happens to be losing, let's help that side, so the stalemate continues. And let's devote our energies to helping the innocents who are caught up in this fire. Let's try and help push the fighting away from the cities. Let's help those who are in need, both in Syria and outside. Finally, I would observe that I think as the number of Syrian refugees increases and increases, now it's 2 million outside the country, many more expected. I would say instead of looking to Europe and the United States and Australia, we should look to Saudi Arabia and related countries. They're close, they're Muslim, they speak Arabic, they're big, they're rich. Why shouldn't the refugees go there? Why are they always coming to the West, where there are all sorts of difficulties, cultural, religious, and other? So Syria seems to be stabilized. And finally, September, Iran. Now, there's very little reason to think that the Iranian elections for president are, in fact, fair and free. And they weren't in 2009, when Ahmadinejad ran for the second time, and I doubt they were in 2013. But whether or not they were free and fair, the elections brought Hassan Rouhani to the presidency with an overwhelming vote, over 50%, which is pretty good when there are 6 candidates. Whether he was picked by Ali Khamenei, the supreme leader, or whether he was allowed to win, doesn't really matter, he did win. And he was the least aggressive of those candidates, the least Islamist, the least dogmatic, the least aggressive about nuclear weapons and so forth. Now the great question about Iran is, does Rouhani represent a new approach, or does he not? In other words, he's not himself the key person. Doesn't matter what he's thinking. What really matters is what Khamenei is thinking. Did Khamenei choose Rouhani or allow Rouhani to become president in order to slow down the timetable, to win more time for the Iranian centrifuges to be turning, to get closer to nuclear weapons? Or did he choose allow Rouhani because he really wants to make a change? He sees that nuclear weapons are too expensive, too painful. Which is this? I can't tell you. Right now, at this moment, I think, the P5 plus 1, let's say, permanent members of the Security Council in Germany are meeting with representatives of the Iranian government in Geneva, and they have made it clear that they are not going to let this go on for weeks and months, but they want something concrete. And I should say it's very simple. Endless resolutions of laws passed by Iranian compliance. If they want to comply, they can do it right away. They can open up their facilities, they can stop enriching uranium, they can do it immediately. So either they want to make a change or they don't. I'm very suspicious. I think they don't want to. I think, like the North Korean government, the Iranian government is absolutely determined to get those nuclear weapons and pay whatever price is necessary. In North Korea, it was starvation. In Iran, it will be hardship, probably not starvation, but it will be hardship. Now, it could be that Khamenei has come to the conclusion that his regime is in danger if he continues this way. Could be, I can't tell you. But I doubt it. I think he sees this as a way to extend his period of grace and to continue with the weapons. Indeed, Rouhani admits in his book that this is what he did a decade ago when he was the negotiator for Iran. He said he played for time. He went slowly, he gave lots of arguments, and he won more time for the nuclear program. I tend to think that's the case here again, but we shall see soon enough. I think Turkey and Iran are so important because basically the modern era was defined by Iran in the revolution of 1978-79 by the coming to power of Khomeini and Islamism. Islamism is the ideology that seeks to apply Islamic law, Sharia, or Turkish Sharia, in its entirety, in a very severe way, as a way to become rich and strong. This ideology had been in opposition, and Khomeini really came to power. And since 1979, it has been the dominant ideology of the Middle East. The regime in Iran is fragile. A great majority of Iranians don't like this regime, don't like this form of Islam. And as we've seen, the same thing has happened in Egypt, arguably Turkey to some extent, Tunisia to some extent, even in Syria, which sees a reaction against it. In Saudi Arabia, it sees a reaction against it. So the great development that's taking place now, I think, in Iran is that it's moving towards a post-Khomeini era. How long, when it will take place, I can't predict for you. But the Islamist elements are ever more isolated. And then they're more isolated in the region. What only a year ago looked to be a surge of Islamism. Islamism seemed to be on the ascent. Is now no longer the case. Islamism is in retreat. And this is, to me, the big story of the moment. Turkey is so important, not just because it has a large population, great economic growth, strategic position, but also because it is evolving new forms of Islamism. I mentioned before Gül and Gülen. Both of them are rather new kinds of Islamists, softer, more subtle. It raises all sorts of questions about the future of Islamism. So these are the really two key countries. Let's say Saudi Arabia is another, but Turkey and Iran are the key countries. A few thoughts about American foreign policy. American foreign policy has been characterized since World War II by an activist spirit that we know better what to do. We get impatient with our allies. Push them aside. We do things for them. And the result is that those allies tend to be critical of us and become irresponsible. My favorite illustration of this is in 1972. The head of the Progress Party in Denmark, who was anti-taxes, said, you know, we can save a lot in taxes if we close down our military and instead had a voice machine that said in Russian, we surrender. Think of all the money that we save, think of all the lives that we save. Now that never happened, he wasn't elected. But still, that an important politician, who came in number 2 in the elections that followed, could say something like this, even in not complete seriousness, suggests that there was in Denmark and much of Europe, through the Cold War, a lack of seriousness, a lack of maturity. There was a sense they could say and do what they wanted because the United States would take care of issues. And the same applied, for example, in South Vietnam. We were the ones trying to push the Vietnamese, the South Vietnamese, to be strong, to stand up to the Viet Cong in the north. But the same thing happened closer here in the 1990s with Saddam Hussein. It was we, the Americans, who were pushing for sanctions, pushing for limitations on Saddam's power. The Turks, the Saudis, the Iranians were all quite relaxed about it. So the whole burden fell on us. This has been a problem for American foreign policy. We're so active, determined, visionary that we take responsibility. We become the adult. Others become children. There are exceptions. France did not want to become childlike. Israel certainly not become childlike. But in general, this has been the trend of American foreign policy. We take responsibility. Our allies can do whatever they want. Well, that's come to an end. Barack Obama has wanted to make the United States a child. This is too much trouble being made. He is focused on domestic politics, in particular health care, but also budgets, education, immigration, and other such issues. As I put it, he is the 4th Democrat in a century who wants fundamentally to change the relationship between state and society. Woodrow Wilson, Franklin Roosevelt, Lyndon Johnson, and Barack Obama. Each of them is growing the role of government at the expense of civil society. That's his passion. And that's what his presidency is about, not in the least. And so there's been a certain neglect and inconsistency. What better example than what happened in Syria in August and September? Kerry, the Secretary of State, and say this is absolutely unacceptable. Obama himself indicating that an attack would come within the next few days. And then the first retreat saying, well, no, first Congress has to agree, which it doesn't have to, but he said it has to. And second, saying, well, maybe the Russians have some help they can give us, and so let's sign an agreement with them. Complete inconsistency, leaving everyone confused. But also in other cases, you can see similar things. In Egypt, the American role is despised by both sides. You see signs in Egypt about Obama the terrorist, meaning Obama supporting the Muslim Brotherhood, which is terrorist, so Obama the terrorist. So that's from the pro-Morsi. But the pro-Sisi himself, in the interviews he's given, has been very negative about the U.S. government. So that both sides are angry at the United States in a way that's not happened in 40, 50 years. So what we see is a retreat. It is hard to imagine an American attack on Iranian nuclear installations. The U.S. government is losing ground. The protector, the ally, is less important, less active, less interested than it historically has been. Now this can change. It can also not change. We don't know. We don't know who the next president will be. But have a successor to Obama who is got the same, who has the same outlook. We could have as was the case between Jimmy Carter and Ronald Reagan, a dramatic change. We don't know. But the American role in the Middle East has fundamentally changed in the last couple of years, and it's likely to stay this way for another 3.5 years. So it means that the allies of the United States have to be more active, have to think for themselves, have to take up the responsibility. It's a different world. This is not just true in the Middle East, for example, in East Asia as well, where China is growing and threatening. Countries around China, which historically have been relying on the United States, now are getting worried that the United States is going to be there. So, I don't know, 3.5 years, 7.5 years, 11.5 years, who knows? But this is here now and will be here for a while. Finally, a couple words on Cyprus. It seems to me that Cyprus has been isolated until recently. In a region that is culturally, politically somewhat alien, having its problem, in particular the invasion of 1974, which was unrelated to the other issues of the region. I'm connected to Syria, I'm connected to Lebanon, I'm connected to Israel, I'm connected to Egypt. But now, because in part of the gas and oil, and in part because of Turkey's general aggressiveness, and Turkey was not aggressive except in the Cyprus case. It was not aggressive. Turkey wasn't interested in the Middle East. It was not aggressive in the Middle East. Didn't have issues in the Middle East. I spent a week in the Turkish foreign ministry in 1992, and I was so impressed by the fact that nothing was happening there. It was like they were waiting for the memo from Washington to tell them what to think and do, and we did. It was, from the American point of view, it was very nice. It was a very quiet place. Now it's not. And so this Turkish activism makes Cyprus part of a larger issue. It's no longer Cyprus on its own with the Turkey problem. Israel has a Turkey problem. Syria has a Turkey problem. Iraq has a Turkey problem. Egypt has a Turkey problem. You're part of a larger network. And I think the Greek Cypriot Israeli alliance that's emerging is a reflection of that reality. And who knows? Egypt could be part of it too. Could be part of the pipeline. Who knows? So what I see is that Cyprus is now part of the region, and its issues are now regional issues, and regional issues are now Cypriot issues in a way that it wasn't before. And so in my own personal biography, I was here first time in 1969, second time in 1972, third time as a guest of this think tank in 2011, and now in 2013. So I was absent from Cyprus, and now I'm here, I've been writing about it. And more than that, I was very pro-Turkish, and I overlooked the Cyprus problem because there were so many other things about Turkey. The modernity of Turkey, the model for other Muslim countries, that I didn't like 1974 at all, but it was minor compared to all the other things. Now it's not minor. Now it is symbolic of the other problems. At the time in 1974, it didn't look like jihadis. Bülent Ecevit was not a jihadi. He was a socialist. He was the one who was prime minister in 1974 in Turkey, who invaded Cyprus. But in retrospect, it does look like a jihadi effort, and the destruction of churches, and the throwing out of the Greek-speaking Christian Cypriots from the area feels like ethnic cleansing. It all fits into a bigger pattern. So for me and for others, Cyprus is now part of the game, which is one reason why I'm here, and one reason why I want to learn more about what's taking place. Your energy reserves, or your strategic cooperation with Israel, or Turkish activities with the settlers from Anatolia in the north, these seem to be all part of the larger regional issues. So welcome to the Middle East, whether you like it or not. I think the gas and oil make Cyprus stronger, but at the same time make things more dangerous. You have a potential target, even greater target than you were before, because of these treasures. So you live in interesting times. We all live in interesting times. The Middle East is in flux. I think it's a necessary flux. It's a necessary transition the Middle East is going through, for better or worse. You're part of it. Take a few questions.
I think we should open the floor for any questions. So if anybody wants to ask the first question, please.
The first question, or the only question I would like to ask, is taking into consideration the geo-strategic developments within the Middle East and the area around Cyprus in particular, and taking into consideration Turkey's alliance that's had for the last 20 odd years with the USA and indeed with Israel. And what we must also remember is Turkey has a bilateral agreement with Israel to develop and to form some military arsenal. So there's military weapons that will still go ahead on deals that Israel have agreed with Turkey 10 years ago that are implemented at this particular time. And also with the United States of America. We have to remember that Turkey a year and a half ago visited Washington and pre-ordered 20 F-16s, I think, or 20 F-22s. Either F-16s or 22s, I could be wrong. Yeah. So there is still a military partnership between the USA and Turkey, and also a military partnership between Israel and Turkey. Yes, now we are currently seeing a different type of stance that the Israeli government and the USA are taking on Turkey. However, though, with these bilateral agreements in place as a Cypriot in Cyprus, what hope can I have, or confidence can I have, that one day Israel or the USA will help the government of Cyprus and the people of Cyprus in order to find a peaceful solution, fair solution on the island?
A fair enough question. Yes, there are a number of agreements that were signed years ago between Israel and the United States on one hand and Turkey on the other. In the Israeli case, they canceled some of those agreements. They're not going through. Not all of them are canceled, but some of the more important ones are canceled, and no new ones, as far as I know, being negotiated. There are, in fact, good trade relations between Israel and Turkey. Trade relations have blossomed despite the political issues, but not military cooperation. That has declined. In the U.S. case, the military cooperation has continued, but it is in jeopardy. The Turks just a few weeks ago indicated they were going to spend over $4 billion to buy arms from China. And not just arms from China, but from a Chinese company that is under American sanctions for selling arms to Iran. So it's a provocation. They rejected the American and European bids. They accepted the Chinese, saying it was a better deal, better equipment. I don't know if it's better or not, but clearly this is a provocation. It's again one of those things that I mentioned earlier about Erdogan not learning his lessons. And he keeps on being provocative. He keeps on pushing in the same direction. Should this deal go through, I think we'll have a major impact on U.S.-Turkish relations. And it would be the second major impact. The first one was 10 years ago. March 1st, 2003, saw the Turkish parliament reject the American request to use Turkish air and land to attack, as a base to attack Iran. 17 days, 18 days later, the Turks rejected that. And that was the first major reduction in U.S. confidence in Turkey. Yes, the arms have still been growing. That coordination and sympathy and alliance that goes back not 20, 30 years, it goes back 60 years to the Korean War. That's gone. And now, these other steps, Turkish interest in the Shanghai regional organization, which is headed by China and Russia as an alternative to NATO, is making people wonder. Turkish joint military exercises with the Chinese making people wonder. So things are happening. Yes, more slowly than you and I would like, but they are changing. Washington is waking up to the fact that Erdogan is not just another Turkish leader, but is someone with a completely different disposition. It's taken a long time. I was someone who tried to make this case 10 years ago. No one was listening. People now listening. There's much more receptivity to this. So I think you'll see more changes in the future.
Professor Cox, given that in the last 10 years or so, the Turkish model of Islamist government is sort of a Wasat model, and to some extent to Jordan and Kuwait, was seen as a hopeful sign that Turkey could represent a kind of paradigm of Islamism, a kind of gentle Islamism in the sense that it's modern, it's moderate, and that it's middle of the road. Now, you've implied that that's no longer even an option for Assisi. Could you develop a bit of that? Why is that the case?
Not even an option for them.
Yeah, Assisi and...
Assisi.
Yeah.
What happened to the Turkish model of Islamism? It's not dead. But Erdogan's behavior, in particular, his sense that he was elected, re-elected, and now is a kind of sultan who do anything he likes, and if you don't like him, then vote against him in the next election. It's really irritating terms. Plus the fact that he meddles in the TV shows that he runs, the number of children women should have, what the fashion on the Turkish airlines should be, and on, all over. He just gives opinions. People are tired of this, irritated. And so it's really, I think, him rather than the Turkish model. And I think the Turkish model could revive were he replaced by someone like you. It could be still very influential. I'm just saying that Erdogan himself has done himself into a and is creating more and more problems. Look, in late May, there was this small demonstration in a small park in Istanbul. He happened to have been mayor of Istanbul. He knew this park. It's a very central park. Taksim Square. Everybody knows it. But it's small. And he took this very local issue and turned it into a national trauma, where there were demonstrations across the country, deaths, injuries, anger. His standing went down. As I said before, the currency, the interest rates, the economic, the stock market were all affected by it. It was a self-created harm. It didn't need to happen. And again, he's doing this to himself. So I don't think it's the Turkish model that's happening. I think it's Erdogan who has become too authoritarian. And if the Turkish model is to survive, he has to go. If he stays, then I think the Turkish model is the farm. But I'd be surprised if he stays, because there's so many others who see it, who are saying roughly what I'm saying that they want it to survive. I don't, but they want it to survive. I think they'll manage to achieve it. So I wouldn't count Turkey out in terms of its role in Islam. I think it just is a matter of whether Erdogan personally remains the key figure or someone else takes the place.
Can I ask a hypothetical question? In view of all these changes in Turkish aggression, I would say, as I said, hypothetical, is there a chance for America to withdraw its bases from Turkey and move them say to Greece? Because as we all know, Turkey became such big, a bully in the area, say, because of the backing of the United States for many years. So is there any chance of that?
Is there a chance of removal of American bases? Well, they're not exactly American bases, they're NATO bases. The most important of them is Injury, which is a very important NATO base. So I think you're really asking a question about NATO. And the way I would phrase the question is should Turkey be in NATO? my answer would be no, or at least it should not be an active member. I believe Turkey should be suspended from its membership. What is NATO about these days? NATO was founded as a common pact against the Soviet Union. Last I checked, the Soviet Union has been gone for 20 years. What is NATO all about? A Secretary General of NATO in the mid-1990s, Willy Claes of Belgium, said that NATO is about radical Islamism. And others have said similar things. For example, Jose Maria Aznar, the former Prime Minister of Spain, has said that's what NATO is, and it should be expanded to include other countries that are part of this effort. I agree with that. But that's not NATO's formal position, and NATO doesn't really have an enemy. It's just a group of nice people who are working together. But if you accept that NATO does have an enemy, and it's radical Islam, then what exactly is Turkey doing in this group? It's the problem. And further, it gets worse, because the Secretary General of NATO, Rasmussen, was Prime Minister of Denmark in 2006 and 2007, at the time of the Danish cartoon crisis. And he was severely attacked by Erdogan and others in Turkey for his position. His position was, I'm Prime Minister, they are editors and publishers, I have nothing to say. We have freedom of speech, they can do what they want. This infuriated Erdogan. And so when Rasmussen was up for the candidacy as Secretary General, Erdogan's government extracted many promises from Rasmussen that he would be very soft on Islam and on Turkey, which in fact he has been. So not only is Turkey not appropriate as part of NATO, but it's defanging NATO. It's making NATO, it's neutering NATO. It's making NATO not effective. In one area where NATO can really be helpful. So I think Turkey should be suspended, maybe ejected. Yes, that would mean the loss of Madrid and other bases, but I think that's a price worth paying. So it's a NATO decision.
He asked to speak first.
It looks like the negotiations for the Cyprus problem are gaining pace. And it seems that towards the end of this year, beginning of the next year, we are going to have intense negotiations to solve the Cyprus issue. And the parameter seems to be there. There is a weak economic and geopolitical position of Greece. There is economic crisis in Cyprus. So it's time to twist the arms of the Greek Cypriots and, let's say, achieve a solution to the island. A solution that, under the current political environment, it looks like that is going to give advantages to the Turkish side. What do you think the Israeli react would be to a solution that would bring Turkey, side by side to its quarters? Because up to now, the situation is different due to the division of the island. Thank you.
Well, before answering your question about Israel, let me offer an alternative understanding of the beginning of negotiations in a few weeks, which is to say that you are strong and the Turkish side is weak. I mentioned before that Davutoglu's dream of no problems with neighbors has turned out to be problems with every neighbor. So that's, Davutoglu is in bad shape. It's terrible. And the greatest single problem in Turkish politics today is Syria. It's a highly unpopular war. The Turkish involvement in Syria is highly unpopular. Plus the other issues are unpopular. The government is seen as doing better. There are a lot of critics. Second, So one is the Turkish foreign policy is in disarray, it's doing badly. And the second is the Greek, Cypriot, Israeli building alliance, which is a source of strength, which you didn't have before. So I think it's possible to see this the opposite way. You're focused on the economics. To be sure that's there. But it's temporary. And I would be surprised if that were the key. I think these other factors are more important. As for Israel, I don't know exactly what the Israeli views are, but I imagine that the Israelis would be not enthusiastic about having Turkish control over more of Cyprus than is the case today. At the same time, I would say to you that the Israelis have not given up on Turkey. They see, after they made the apology in March about the Nazi monument, which was not a sincere apology, but an apology which they felt they needed to do to find out if things would get better after this. And they learned that they would. It made no difference. The Turks accepted this apology and demanded more, and kept on criticizing it. So it was a failure from the Israeli point of view, except it was a success in that it showed clearly, more clearly, that the Turks don't want to have good relations. Nonetheless, the idea of resurrecting good relations with Turkey remains, I think, a significant force in Israeli security circles. They haven't given up. And they hope someday they will go back to the way things were before Mali or other incidents of the last few years. So the Israelis are building this relationship with Cyprus and Greece, but they haven't entirely given up the Turkish. It's obviously an attractive ally to have. 80 million people, member of NATO, advanced, huge military. 400,000 soldiers, non-Arab, on the other side of Syria, which has always been a problem for Israel. So I wouldn't assume that Israel has given up on Turkey, but at the same time, I would assume that the Israelis would be unwelcome to see, would not welcome a greater Turkish presence. And I think the Israelis are quite happy about the Turkish isolation, the Turkish difficulties. But it's happiness not just because Turkey is less dangerous, but also because maybe this will lead to Turkey coming back and being an ally. They haven't given up. And from their point of view, I think they'd be happy to have alliances with Cyprus, Greece, and they're not doing this at the expense of that.
Right. First of all, thank you very much for the very impressive talk. My question will be more strategic and thinking out of the box. We as Greeks know the Turks quite well. We've got a huge Turkey there with a history that dictates that Turkey should be aggressive. If you look back at the whole of history of Turkey. So now it's Mr. Erdogan, Prime Minister, so has caused problems with Israel. But in 4 or 5 years' time, somebody else may be there who may be more friendly. So as long as this is going on, all the countries in the region speaking as a Mediterranean rather than Cypriot will be dancing to the tune of the huge Turkey there. When it smiles, we're all nice to Turkey. When Turkey is bad to us, we're all against Turkey. We form alliances, then change them again, and I see Israel doing the same. And the same, Greece might do the same. So in other words, as long as there's a huge aggressive neighbor, we'll always have problems for the next 500 years. Turkey is not one country. Turkey is many countries together. It's the Kurds, there are the Muslims, there are the crypto-Christians in the West. Do you think it's possible one day in the future we may see Turkey following the route that Yugoslavia followed? Do you see you could see Turkey splitting into 3 countries or 4 much smaller countries, much lesser threat to the whole region, thus peace forever? Thank you.
3 or 4 countries I can't see, but 2 I can. I can see the Kurdish regions breaking away, becoming autonomous, conceivably joining with the Iraqi and Syrian parts, even conceivably the Iranian Kurdish. All quite far away, but definitely conceivable. The only other population that I can imagine would be the Alevis, but they're not really in a specific region. And so far there's been no urge to be autonomous like the Kurds have. So I have a hard time imagining anything else, but Kurds, yes. And what's particularly noteworthy is the difference in demography between Turkic-speaking Turks and Kurdish-speaking Turks. As you point out correctly, Turkey is something of an empire. And when Ataturk said that everyone in Turkey is a Turk, he was not very accurate. It would be better if the country would name something else, Turks and Kurds. But, so it's confusing, because Turk means 2 things, an ethnic Turk and a citizen of the Republic of Turkey. Talking now about ethnic Turks. Ethnic Turks have a small and weakening birth rate. It's under 2, it's something like 1.7, 1.6, going down. Kurds have a very robust birth rate per woman, children per woman. Over 4 children per woman. So it looks like in not too many years, the Turkish army will be half Kurdish, maybe eventually more than half Kurdish. Turkish cultural life cannot ignore the increasingly important Kurdish language and songs, television programs. It was repressed until quite recently. Kurdish was not allowed, not in schools, not in television, not in newspapers. Now it's allowed, and because of the difference in birth rates, it's growing and growing. It may be that the Turks don't want to share the country half and half with the Kurds, and would rather have it be separate. So yes, I think that's a real possibility. Other than that, I don't think there's much chance of Turkey breaking into smaller states.
I think I would like to see the big picture. When we just walked across the other side, and it was really tragic to see, and that when I came to the conclusion that it's very hard to negotiate or deal with somebody that's not even admitting the Armenian genocide, for one thing, and people have no respect for no sanctity of human life. And I think that the common denominator that we find in many areas around Cyprus and elsewhere is the Islamic Sharia laws, which is having to eventually caliphate, which reminds me goes back to the early Ottoman Empire with their atrocities and their guard business and etc. And to see that happen nowadays, and powers like the U.S. or the EU really haven't done that much to combat that. So I believe in the big picture. I don't think there could be much negotiation, but we have to take a different approach to deal with this issue with Sharia and Islam as it is.
2 reactions to what you said. One is that I found, and I'd be curious if others disagree, I found that among Turks of Turkey, the invasion of Cyprus in 1974 is an issue of complete consensus. There's no one who disagrees with it, no one who condemns it. I mean, Turks are arguing about all sorts of issues all the time, but 1974 is not a debate. They all say it's a good idea. It's remarkable. I've never come across a Turk, either in person or in writing, who has said, who's condemned it? Have you? Have I missed something? Are there Turks who say this was terrible? This was a mistake? Okay.
Yeah, Turkish Cypriots.
Turkish Cypriots. I meant Turkish Turks. Yes, Turkish Cypriots have their policy, but in Turkey, the big country, I just don't hear any of this. I'm sure 80 million people. Somebody doesn't want to hear it. It's not a voice you hear. Secondly, about Sharia and Islam and a response to it. One can essentially divide the Muslims into three groups: Al-Qaeda, Khomeini, Ben Laden, Zawahiri, Shabab, Boko Haram, violent, nasty Islamists who invade malls and kill people and say horrible things about non-Muslims and are obviously the enemy. And no one denies that. And then there are Muslims who are on the other end, who are modern, not focused on Islam or the Sharia, who, when they move to the West, are patriotic about the countries where they live, who, in the Muslim-majority countries, don't want Islam to be dominant. But they're clearly people that you can ally. Those are the people that I used to deal with in Turkey, who I thought well. And then there's a third category, and they're clearly people who, the third category are those in the middle, who are Islamist, but who are not violent, and who are not shooting up shopping malls in Kenya, schools in Nigeria, and setting off bombs in Iraq, but working through the system. Erdogan is a perfect example. He wears a tie. He was popularly and legitimately elected. He talks about economic growth. He's a politician in the normal understanding of the term. And so the question is about this middle type. Is he someone who one can deal with, who is really just another normal politician, and admittedly with an Islamic flavor, but just another politician? Or is he, as I would maintain, I would argue, is he someone who has the same goals as Ben Laden, but uses different methods? And indeed, I would argue, more effective methods. So in May 2011, American troops were executing Ben Laden in Pakistan. And a few weeks later, Erdogan turned up at the White House and to the Oval Office. Which do you think is more effective? I see violent jihad, I see terrorism as a sign of weakness. The shopping mall, which is the latest major incident in Kenya, was a sign of weakness. If the Kenyan Islamists were strong, they would be running candidates, they would be running schools, they would be setting up lawyer syndicates and influencing politicians. That's the real way to get to power, not by shooting, killing, torturing people. It's not the way to get. So I'm more scared of Erdogan than of Khomeini. I think this is the way to the future. Terrorism gets the headlines, but working through the system gets the results. And this is something that the US government, European governments don't understand. They much prefer to see non-violent Islamists to violence. And understandably, violent Islamists kill people. Non-violent Islamists don't. But I would rather see violent Islamism because it is ineffectual. It doesn't work. And I see the danger that non-violent Islamists are so clever. Like Erdogan is the perfect example. Erdogan until a year ago was the perfect example. So clever, they managed to make allies, get economic success, and make great strides towards achieving Sharia. Now they do that even that cleverly. When alcohol was limited a few months ago in Turkey, it wasn't for Sharia reasons, it was for health reasons. Not the first place to make alcohol difficult to find for health reasons. But you know the real world is Sharia. So this is the great educational project that one needs to undertake to explain to Western readers that non-violent Islamism is the greatest threat, is a civilization threat to us.
Mr. Kibes, you indicate in your presentations some strength regarding the collaboration between Cyprus and Israel. We know that it's been done a lot of work regarding the exports from Israel. Was a committee for 1.5 years, the General Committee and so on. They took initial decision of 40% export. And they name also Cyprus. But we have seen some reluctance in taking such a decision, subject to be approved by the High Court in case the High Court doesn't approve it, to go to the Parliament, and this is going to be a messy and lengthy procedure. What do you think? How do you envisage yourself? Do they have a better location for Israeli export than Cyprus, which is within EU? And also they have already took the decision they won't go through Turkey. So this shall be the best solution, I believe, for the area and for the Eastern Mediterranean.
Well, let me start by saying I defer to you in any understanding of the gas situation. But what I understand is that there's a debate in Israel over whether to look west or to look east, whether to look primarily to Europe and to be in competition with the Russians, or whether to send the gas towards East Asia, or whether to consume more and more of it domestically. These are not decisions that I am briefed on. I don't know the details of them. But I do know that there is an ongoing debate in Israel about the direction of the gas. I tend to think, and I would ask you, that the orientation towards Europe and competition with the Russians is the best option. I gather that's your view.
Well, is the best option in view of the fact that if they go to Eilat, is not a solution technically. That is the main issue. Of course, they are thinking and evaluating the possibility of going to Eilat, so not to go through the Suez Canal, but this cannot be technically feasible.
One last question? Yes. Sure. You gave a pretty thorough analysis, of the Middle Eastern countries. You even put USA in the picture regarding role, behavior, and all that. The country you haven't mentioned at all was Russia. How do you see Russia's involvement in the Middle East? And let me say something to Mr. Cassinis regarding Israel. I've heard the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Israel in a conference recently, saying that Mr. Netanyahu is determined to export regardless of the decision of the High Court. He took the decision to export regardless of what the High Court is gonna go for. As long as he passes for Knesset, he's satisfied and he will export.
Sounds right. Russia. Russia is a difficult subject because there's no cohesive explanation, no simple explanation for Russian foreign policy. One looks at current Russian policy, particularly vis-a-vis Syria, one finds a number of explanations. First is traditional Orthodox Christian Orthodox concern for fellow Christian Orthodox. Traditionally in the 19th century, for example, the French were interested in the Catholics, the British were interested in the Protestants, and the Russians were interested in the Orthodox. That's something that continues and indeed is part of the Russian Cypriot connection, but it's also part of the Russian Syrian connection. Secondly would be the facility at Tartus. The ex-Soviet Union has one foreign facility. It's not a base, it's tiny, 200 people. In Tartus, not far from here on the coast of Syria. It's the only one they have. And it has a certain resonance in Russian foreign policy. Third would be gas. What I mentioned before is the competition. The head of Gazprom, the main Russian gas company, mentioned a few years ago, when Gazprom was worth $400 billion, about the same as ExxonMobil and Apple, that Gazprom would be the first first trillion-dollar company. Well, he got it wrong. Thanks to fracking and other new technologies, Gazprom is now worth $100 billion. Gazprom is going down, not up. And the Russians, Putin in particular, who has used Gazprom as his vehicle, his kitty, his slush fund, his money, are worried about this and want to be part of any deal in the Middle East, and thus are so interested in what's happening here. I'd like to ask audiences, why do you think Vladimir Putin went to the Western Wall, the holiest place of Judaism, and put on a kippah with a headscarf? Why do you think he did that? No prior Russian president has ever gone to Jerusalem, to the Western Wall, and put on a kippah. Well, he only did it for one reason, I think, and it's gas. He's interested in what the Israelis are doing. So, Christians, Tartus, gas, and the final thing would be, should make trouble for the United States. I mean, if we do A, Putin does B, or Z. It's not the Soviet Union. They don't have a vision of their own role. They just want to make trouble for the Americans, and so they do. It's not a very successful foreign policy. Gazprom is not as valuable as it used to be. Siding with Iran against the rest of the Middle East, Iran and Syria, is not a very profitable idea. It's not the way to success. So I think Russian foreign policy is in trouble. I also know that, I'm just writing an article now about the Muslims of Russia. Russia has a population of 144 million people. Muslims are 20 million, 22 million, something like 15%. And while the Muslims have a very high demographic rate, the Russians have a very low demographic rate. And whereas the Muslims live a long life, the Russians live a very short life. The Christian Russians. The number of Christian Russians decreases every year by 700,000. So the proportions are changing rapidly. And one can imagine the majority of Muslim Russia in mid-century. It's not inconceivable. So I think this is something that haunts the leadership in Russia, the fact that there is this growing Muslim presence in the country, and affects its understanding of its relations with other Muslim, with Muslim majority countries. Makes them nervous, and also helps explain this inconsistent and fairly unsuccessful foreign policy. So thank you so much for this opportunity.